You know those stories, right? The ones of human survival that are just so extreme, so completely unbelievable that people immediately throw their hands up and call it a miracle? Well, today, in this explainer, we're diving straight into those exact stories. We're going to look right past the awe and dig into the concrete, hard physics behind what so many people assume are just miraculous tales. I mean, we constantly hear about people walking away from impossible catastrophes, and we usually chalk it up to divine intervention or just impossibly good luck. But what if there's an invisible, mathematical framework that actually governs who lives and who dies? Let's break down the literal math of surviving the end of the world.
Section 1. Miracles of Human Survival. Define the impossible.
Throughout history, people have lived through some truly terrifying scenarios that honestly just utterly defy our understanding of biology. I'm talking about individuals enduring scalding 160-degree Fahrenheit showers. At that temperature, water is rapidly crossing the threshold where it causes severe, immediate burns. Or consider the intense physiological absolute nightmare of being suspended by the wrist for agonizingly long durations. That is a physical stressor that should cause immediate respiratory failure and muscular collapse. And then, perhaps most astoundingly, people literally walking away from the blinding flash and shockwave of atomic blasts. The human body just shouldn't be able to withstand that kind of sheer, overwhelming trauma. It defies literally every biological limit we have.
Which, of course, begs a massive question. When we hear these wild historical accounts, are these survivors just the luckiest people on planet Earth? Did fate just happen to smile upon them? Or is there a strict underlying mechanical reason behind their survival? Is it sheer luck, or is it cold, hard physics?
Section 2. The Tsutomu Yamaguchi pattern, the human microscale.
The number 2. It's a small number, obviously, but in this context, it represents something truly monumental. This is the number of atomic bombing survived by a man named Tsutomu Yamaguchi. He was in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, on a business trip when the absolute unthinkable happened and the first bomb dropped. He was just under 2 miles from ground zero. Astoundingly, he survived, bandaged his wounds, and took a train back home to his family in Nagasaki. And then, he reported to work just in time for the second bomb to drop on August 9th. Again, roughly 2 miles from the epicenter. He survived both. He lived to be 93 years old. It's just a mind-bending reality that really forces us to look closer at exactly how something like this is even physically possible.
His astonishing story anchors our overall pattern here. You see, Yamaguchi didn't survive because he had a guardian angel. He survived because of concrete mechanical realities. In both cases, his exact physical location created a literal thermal and kinetic shadow. Think about it. In Hiroshima, he dove into a muddy ditch, which completely shielded him from the immediate thermal radiation. In Nagasaki, he was in an office building with heavily reinforced stairwells, and the city's hilly topography physically blocked the absolute worst of the blast wave from his immediate position. Surviving these catastrophic events relies entirely on specific physical conditions being met. It's not magic.
Section 3. Physics of the Survival Zone. From Mystery to Math.
So, to really understand this, we need to transition from these human anecdotes over into hard data. We can actually define this life-saving space as the survival zone. This is a measurable, completely scientific pocket where concrete physics and engineering parameters allow for human survival against extreme threats. By mapping this out, we take the magic completely out of the equation, and we replace it with reliable, predictable science. It literally means survival can be plotted out on a graph.
Let's actually look at the math here. Say you're looking at a 15-kiloton nuclear blast, which is similar to what Yamaguchi experienced. Right at the center, you have the lethal zone. That's an area of completely unsurvivable pressure and thermal radiation. But step exactly 1.9 miles away and you enter the survival zone. Why? Well, it happens because of the inverse square law. The energy of a blast dissipates incredibly rapidly over distance. Because the blast wave spreads out spherically, its intensity drops off exponentially the further out it goes. At exactly 1.9 miles, the atmospheric overpressure drops to roughly 2 to 3 pounds per square inch. That right there is the exact mathematical threshold where the blast pressure falls just below the lethal limit for crushing human internal organs. It's a literal window of survival dictated entirely by distance, dissipation, and physical force.
Section 4. Engineering against the apocalypse. The macro scale.
So, what happens when we take these microscale principles of the survival zone and apply them to massive human infrastructure? The answer to that is the legendary Cheyenne Mountain Complex. We have actively engineered this sprawling facility in Colorado to literally weaponize those exact physics against direct nuclear strikes. It's a macro-scale bunker built on the exact same scientific principles of kinetic dissipation and thermal shielding that kept Tsutomu Yamaguchi alive. We just scaled it way up, from a single human in a muddy ditch to a multi-billion-dollar military installation buried under 2,000 feet of solid granite. But how on earth does an entire mountain complex survive a multi-megaton nuke? The secret to the complex's invulnerability really comes down to this number, 1,000. You see, the 15 buildings inside the facility, they don't just sit rigidly on the rock inside the mountain. They rest entirely on exactly 1,000 massive steel springs. And get this, each of these springs weighs 1,000 pounds. It's just an absolutely fascinating feat of engineering that fundamentally redefines how we even approach structural survival.
Here is the sheer brilliance of those mechanics in action. If a direct nuclear strike hits the surface, the mountain itself is obviously going to shake violently from the seismic shockwave. But instead of that sheer force transferring right into the buildings and completely shattering the bunker, those 1,000 massive springs instantly compress. They act as this gigantic seismic dampening system. They are mathematically calibrated to absorb the literally world-ending kinetic energy of a nuclear blast and completely neutralize it right before it reaches the structures. So the buildings inside, they'll just gently sway instead of snapping in half. Those springs effectively create a localized, perfectly engineered survival zone right inside the rock.
So, I leave you with this. Are the limits of human survival dictated by fate, or are they dictated by the unyielding physical laws of our universe? As we've seen today, from standing exactly 1.9 miles away from an atomic blast, all the way to building a sprawling military bunker floating on 1,000 kinetic springs, survival is fundamentally calculable. It's not magic, and it's certainly not a mystery. It is a very precise combination of distance, shielding, and energy dissipation. So, the next time you hear a breaking news story about an absolutely impossible miracle, will you just look for the luck, or will you look for the math?